following verse describes a Vaishnava. Vansha kalpa turubhyascha kripa sindhubhyaeva cha patitanam pavanibhyo vaishnavibhyo namo namaha. Just like a dhyāyantu, Vaishnava can fulfill all the desires of anyone who takes shelter of his lotus feet. Prahlāda Maharaj is a typical Vaishnava. He prays not for himself, but for all living entities, the gentle, the envious, and the mischievous. He always thought of the welfare of mischievous persons like his father, Hiranyakashipu. Prahlāda Maharaj did not ask for anything for himself. Rather, he prayed for the Lord to excuse his demoniac father. This is the attitude of a Vaishnava who always thinks of the welfare of the entire universe. Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavatam are meant for persons who are completely free of envy. Parama nirmatsaranam. Therefore, Prahlāda Maharaj prays in this verse, khalaḥ prasīdatāṁ. May all the envious persons become pacified. The material world is full of envious persons. But if one frees himself of envy, he becomes liberal in his social dealings and can think of others' welfare. Anyone who takes up Krishna consciousness and engages himself completely in the service of the Lord cleanses his mind of all envy. Manaś bhadraṁ, bhajatād, adhokṣaje. Therefore, we should pray to Lord Nrsimhadev to sit in our hearts. We should pray by Hira Nrsimho, Hridaye Nrsimha. Let Lord Nrsimhadev sit in the core of my heart, killing all my bad propensities. Let my mind become clean, so that I may peacefully worship the Lord and bring peace to the entire world. Om Jnana-timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Śrī Gurave Namaha. Mukhaṁ karoti vachalam Purnam Mangayate Garim Yat Kripa Tamaham Bande Shrikunajina Taranam. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhūtale Shrimate Bhakti-vedanta Swami Iti Namani. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharani Nirvishesha Shanyavani Pastachade Satarane. Jai Śrī Kṛṣṇa Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Śrī Advaita Gadadhara Śrīvāsari Gaura Bhakta-vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. When I read this verse, I oftentimes highlight one point here. As we all know, Prabhupada, when he translates verses, he gives his translation and he gives the word-for-word translation of each of the words in the verse. And here in the word-for-word translation of the word khalaḥ, khalaḥ is translated as the envious. And Prabhupada puts in parentheses, almost everyone. Of course, he didn't say everyone, but almost everyone. I guess, an introspective person, I think, would take Prabhupada's word-for-word translation and think, I guess maybe I'm probably in that list. And it can help us at least become a little bit more introspective about, as we said, the painful surgery of introspection and looking within ourselves to go to the root of a propensity of finding faults in others, which is not so easy to overcome. It would be nice if we were all a doshadarshi. This is a reference given in Chaitanya Charitamrita of one Vaishnava. Many Vaishnavas are described as a doshadarshi. Adosha means false. Adosha means without, dosha means false. Kalir dosha nidhe rajan. Adosha means without faults. And dosha darshi is one who sees everyone without faults. And that was described as Haridas Pandit, and Raghunath Das Goswami was also described in a similar way. And practically speaking, many of our elevated Vaishnavas, we should understand them as to be adosha darshi. They don't see. Why they don't look? That's why they don't see, because they don't look. They think that if any faults are to be found, they think that those faults exist in my heart. And because that's naturally how a Vaishnava thinks. As Prabhupada said in the commentary, he says the symptom of an unenvious person is that he thinks of others' welfare. He can think of others' welfare. He says that he's liberal in his social dealings. And being liberal in his social dealings with others implies, although Prabhupada didn't say it, but it definitely implies, that if I'm liberal in social dealings with others, that means it's because I'm strict with myself. And because I'm strict with myself, I can be liberal with others. Unfortunately, those who are not a dosha darshi, they oftentimes look at it in a reverse way. I can't be strict with myself, so it's a lot easier to find the faults in others. And I'll be strict with others. And I'll always tell everybody else what they're doing wrong, and I'll tell them what all their faults are, because it's more painless for me to find faults that way, rather than have to look at myself. And that's why Vaishnavas who are genuinely compassionate and who are beyond that category that Srila Prabhupada has described as khalaḥ, being non-envious, they can think of others' welfare. But it's very hard to think of others' welfare when we're too much absorbed in ourselves and too much absorbed in protecting ourselves and protecting, when I say protecting ourselves, protecting our interests. Because a Vaishnava is one who's supposed to be paradupadukhi. One whose only suffering is that he sees the suffering of others. It's an advanced position, and nobody should try to imitate it. That's why I said how to become free from fault finding is a deep surgery, because it means becoming free from envy. And if almost everyone is envious, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. How to become free from envy? And envy means to see faults in others, but it's one thing to see faults in others, and as we said before, that when dealing with negativity, it implies that it can be dealt with from three sources. One's negative thoughts from others, or negative words from others, or negative actions from others. Sometimes we may have a lot of negative thoughts about others, and we can look at that negative thoughts about others, as we already briefly explained before, that's because we're looking for some fault in others, and because it's easier to find them in others than in ourselves. But negative action, even though we may have negative thoughts about others, the consequences are not as severe when there's negative words about others. Srila Jiva Goswami, in his commentary in Bhakti Sangabha, he quotes a verse from the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, where he talks about what is the characteristic of disrespect towards others. And he quotes a verse spoken by the Avanti Brahmin in 11th canto. He says, sharp arrows that pierce the chest and reach the heart are not as painful as the arrows of insulting words spoken by a materialistic person, which become lodged in the heart and stay there. Yeah. He quotes that as an example of what is disrespect of others. And his commentary, when he quotes that verse in the Bhagavatam, he says, yes, sharp arrows that pierce the chest and reach the heart. He said, in this verse it's presented that more painful is when it gets lodged in the heart. Because when it's lodged in the heart, it's causing so much pain, and people have to just live with that pain. And it's not easy. In fact, when I think of this verse, I oftentimes use the example, all of you I'm sure are aware of the story told by Srila Prabhupada, and it's in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Magrari the hunter. Magrari the hunter, the whole story was brought up when as an example of how a person who is as envious as Magrari could, by the association with a Vaishnava, can become completely free from envy. And Magrari, he was trained from his childhood by his father to half-kill animals. That was, and not only was he trained to do it, but he was experienced pleasure from doing it, to half-kill. And he would use arrows, sharp arrows, to half-kill. And once Narada Muni was walking along the path, and he saw different animals. I think it was a deer, a rabbit, and some other animal. I can't remember, 3 animals he saw. And they were all lying along the path, and they were writhing in pain. And when he saw them, of course, it was painful for him to see them suffering in this way, and he wanted to know who's responsible for this. So he began walking off the path to look who had done it. And as he walked off the path, and all the other animals who were also present, they fled. And Magrari, who was behind the tree shooting those arrows, became very disturbed and said, "Don't you see what you just did?" He said, "Because you walked off the path, all these animals fled, and they were my next targets." And Narada Muni said, "Are you responsible for these animals?" And Magrari said, "Yes." "Why? Why have you half-killed them? Why have you caused them so much, intentionally inflicted so much suffering on them?" And he said, "Well, I've been trained like this. I've been trained to inflict pain on others by my sharp arrows, and therefore I was trained to half-kill them, and I enjoy seeing them suffering." And Narada Muni said, "My dear sir, humbly come before you. I have one humble request. I'd like to ask for you. Mugurari says, oh, you want some skins? I can give you some animal skins. Is that what you'd like? And Narada said, no. My humble request is, you're a hunter. It's your position to kill animals. That's what hunters do. My humble request is, if you're going to fire arrows into the animals, kill them. Don't half kill them. If you kill them, at least you're doing your business as a hunter. But when you half killing them, you're willfully causing them pain. And you know what's going to happen? You're going to suffer the consequences of that pain. And he explained to him, because when Narada Muni said this to Mugurari, Mugurari took a little bit of interest and tried to understand, what does it mean? Can you please explain this? And he began explaining how the laws of karma work. And that if you willfully cause suffering to others, then in the future you will have to suffer in the same way that you cause suffering to others. So better just kill them. And don't half kill them. Because the suffering you're going to get for all these animals you've half killed, you will all come back to you in the future. And Mugurari was listening to this, and it's natural when a person hears about some future suffering, then he asked the question, well, can you tell me how to avoid this suffering? How do I avoid it? So of course Narada Muni took advantage of his submissive student who wanted to know how to avoid that suffering, and explained to him, that, well, the first thing you should do is as I told you, if you're going to kill animals, but if you really want to know how to avoid suffering, he said, just break your bow and stop this altogether. And as he explained the whole message to Mugurari, the hunter, because of the association of Narada Muni, he became very much influenced. And the result of his association, a faith was awakened in Mugurari. And when Narada Muni to break the bow, Mugurari said, well, tell me, I'm a hunter, how will I live if I break my bow? And Narada said, don't worry, I'll take care of you. Just break your bow, and I'll provide all your necessities. Of course, Narada presented it that way, but ultimately Krishna provides all necessities. So, then Mugurari, he took his bow and he broke it. And Srila Prabhupada writes in the commentary of that verse, he said, when Mugurari broke his bow, he said, this is initiation. His initiation means when a person understands that I have to give up my conception, my bodily conception of life, and come to a platform of spiritual understanding, that from this day on, I will behave as a spirit soul, act as a spirit soul. And as a spirit soul, I will not identify with this physical body. In fact, there's more on this topic about what you've brought up. I'll go back to Mugurari because I want to finish that topic. But there's in the 5th canto of the Bhagavatam also there's the story of Jadabharata Maharaja Hugana. And as we know in that story, Jadabharata was picked by the carriers who were carrying Maharaj Rahugana on the palanquin because they were looking for somebody who was an easy person to find, who was muscular, strong-built, and who could cover the fourth position to carry Maharaj Rahugana's palanquin. So they found this deaf and dumb Jadabharata, who was Bharat Maharaj in a previous life, but he was taking the position of being deaf and dumb because he didn't want to have to associate with people, because he learned from a previous life not to get involved in mundane relationships. So he was very elevated spiritually. So when Jadabharata was taken to carry the palanquin of the Maharaj Rahugana, Jadabharata was walking along the path, and because he didn't want to step on the ants, he was always trying to avoid the ants, while the palanquin was jostled all the time by his behavior, and Maharaj Rahugana didn't like that at all. And he started hurling all kinds of insults to Jadabharata. And Jadabharata just stood there and saying, you know that these insults that you're hurling at me, they have no effect on me because I'm not this body. You're describing my body, it's fat, thin, whatever, but that's not me. I'm soul within the body. And he was completely undisturbed by the insults of Maharaj Rahugana. And Maharaj Rahugana, of course, was so impressed by the enlightened state of consciousness of Jadabharata that he became submissive and took instruction from him. So, yeah, it's not easy to be at the other end of sharp words. And therefore, as we said, they're very painful. And persons who actually use sharp words to find fault and to criticize others, it's like that example we used from the Jiva Goswami gives, like the sharp arrows that pierce the chest and reach the heart. They're not as painful as the insulting words of a person who's spoken these sharp words, and those words have become lodged in the heart. So for Mugari, better than half-killing, which was to intentionally cause pain by his arrows, Narada instructed him better to kill them. But then, because Mugari became so affected by hearing from Narada Muni, he realized that, well, I should give up killing altogether. If that's you're telling me to break the arrow, break my bow, I'll break the bow. And I have faith in your instructions. And then Narada Muni instructed him what he should do to how to maintain himself without having to kill animals and without having to inflict pain. And of course, as we know later, the story is when Narada Muni came back with Parvat Muni, the two of them together. They came before Mugari, and as they were approaching, Mugari saw his spiritual master in a distance, and before even doing his dandavats, he took his cloth and he started clearing away all the ants from the path. And Parvat Muni was so astounded to see that this person was previously half killing animals, and now he doesn't even want to cause harm to an ant. Such is the benefit of association with the Vaishnava. They appreciate it. So, same way for a person who causes pain by criticizing and insulting others, same thing, the message that Narada Muni gave to Mugari, same message is there. Don't half kill by intentionally inflicting pain. Because a Vaishnava is somebody who gives respect to all living beings. Lord Chaitanya, in Chaitanya Bhagavat, he says, I raise my hands and I loudly declare, anyone who does not criticize others and chants my name, he will certainly be delivered. That was his proclamation. But it's not easy. Because we have this tendency, because as Prabhupada said, khalaḥ means almost everyone, there's some envy. And we have this tendency to find fault with others and criticize others. And as I said before, it's one thing if it's in the mind, but it's another thing when it comes from the lips. And we start speaking about others. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, I many times given a course on it actually, once spoken on for 6 days continuously on the topic of controlling the urge to speak. And he wrote an essay on the teachings of Rupa Goswami and Upadeshamrita. He wrote an essay for each of the 6 activities which are favorable for devotional service and the 6 activities which are unfavorable for devotional service. And one of the activities which is unfavorable for devotional service is speaking unnecessarily about others. And he gave a very, it's more than I can possibly cover in a short talk this evening about. But describes this as controlling the urge to speak. And maybe I'll read a short part of it. I think I have it here, and I'll speak about it because it's relevant to the topic of dealing with negativity. In fact, I just gave a 2-day class on this topic in Turkey, and we began by saying that in the Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains that in a society of Vaishnavas, that the best way to experience loving relationships between the Vaishnavas, he quotes the verse, Dati Patigrinati Guyam Kyati Pichati, that which describes what is real friendship amongst Vaishnavas. That they give gifts, they accept gifts, they give prasad, accept prasad, they reveal their mind in confidence and then inquire confidentially. And he said when these activities are engaged in amongst Vaishnavas, they create a bondship of loving, piti lakshana, loving friendship between devotees. If that kind of loving friendship is not there, it's very difficult to survive in a society of devotees. And if such an important activity, Rupa Goswami describes 6 characteristics of loving relationships. Okay, giving prasadam, accepting prasadam, giving gifts, accepting gifts. But if you really want to get to the heart of a loving relationships, it's revealing one's mind in confidence and inquiring confidentially. But in the current, let's say, atmosphere of this world, even in a society of devotees, it's very difficult to find somebody you can reveal your mind in confidence to. And if you can't reveal your mind in confidence, you're missing out on 2 of the most essential aspects of loving relationships. Why can't you reveal your mind in confidence? Because everybody's afraid if I say something in confidence, it'll be on Facebook the next day. Nobody knows how to control the urge to speak. It's one thing to small villages. Bhaktivinoda Thakur was giving instructions how to deal with, because he was preaching to the household and communities, spreading it through the Namhatas. And you know, Gramya Kata is village talk. We all know what village talk is. People sit around, and the natural proclivity for every human being who has a tongue is to talk about others. Why is it a natural proclivity? Because for Vaishnavas, everybody likes to talk about Krishna. But if we don't talk about Krishna and we have a natural proclivity to talk about others, watch out. What's going to come out? We're going to start talking about others. You know, people will sit down on the bench, you know, and she's laughing because she knows what I'm talking about. In the former Soviet Union, you'd always have these babushkas sitting on a bench outside. And they knew everything that was going on. You know, I remember one time I arrived at a big apartment building in Dnipropetrovsk, and I was staying. I was going to spend a couple of nights at a devotee's home, and then I came inside, and then these two grandmothers came in and brought some flowers, and they started telling me they knew everything about my arrival. And I asked the person who owned the flat, who are they? And she said, oh, they're the GBC. They know everything that goes on. They knew when you were coming even before I knew. They just sit there all day on the bench. I call them bench warmers. You know, they sit there all day on the bench, and they just talk about everybody that's going on. You know, it's village talk. Village talk. They you know, ask them to talk about Krishna. Who's Krishna? But you ask them to talk about everybody else. That's what they spend. That's their whole life. Talking about everybody's doing. You know what he did. You know what she did. You hear what? That's what people do. And people like to talk. Nobody understands how to control the urge to speak. As soon as you start talking about others, then Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains. And I'll just read it, what he says about this tendency to talk about others. He says in Śrī Kṛṣṇa, he says, talking without reason about other people is extremely adverse to devotional service. Many people talk about others to establish their own reputation. In other words, if I can make them look bad, I look good. So that's why they talk about. In fact, they'll find so many people to talk and say bad things about others, because obviously the more people we tell who are really bad, we look better. We look better. So he's making that point. Many people talk about others. They don't know how to control the urge to speak, to establish their own reputation. Being envious, some people are accustomed to discuss others' character. The minds of those who are busy in such topics can never be fixed on the lotus feet of Krishna. Never be fixed. They're always disturbed. How can the mind? And he explains later why they can never be fixed on the lotus feet of Krishna. He says, because when a person speaks about others with hatred, with envy, malice, and pride, he says he becomes an offender of Bhakti Devi, and his mind can never be peaceful. He said before one speaks about others, he has to look in his own heart to make sure, am I really protecting myself by speaking about others? Is there some hatred, some envy, some pride? Why do I have to say it? And because this whole topic is, you know, as we said, he was giving an essay on unnecessarily speaking about others, which is called prajalpa. And the more we unnecessarily speak about others, the more we create an atmosphere where nobody can have confidential dealings with others. We can't reveal our mind in confidence because we're afraid as soon as we say something in confidence about others, if it leaks out, it's going to come back and cause me so much pain. So much pain. Better I don't reveal my mind. Better I don't say anything. But then we suffer because we have no loving relationships. And all we have is our mind. And Krishna says for one to control his mind, it's his best friend. But if he fails to control his mind, it's his worst enemy. So I have enemies outside, I have enemies inside. How will I ever be peaceful? It's terrible. It's like hell to live without loving relationships. It's literally hell. But yet, if we don't learn how to control the urge to speak about others, it's very hard to have loving relationships. Because part of loving relationships is to reveal my mind in confidence and to inquire confidentially. So this is, of course, this is overcoming or dealing with negativity means that we should not be perpetrators of negativity ourselves by what is our topic of speech. What is our tendency? When we come in the association of devotees, do we immediately start, tendency is in association, sometimes we call it devotee association, they become friends because they have a common enemy. So we're good. Right? So many times we see that people become friends because there's a common enemy. But that's not, that doesn't work in Krishna consciousness. That's not Vaishnava. That's not a Vaishnava mentality. Because a Vaishnava, as Prahlad Maharaj says to his teachers, Santa and Amarka, he says, I don't see any enemies. I see everyone equal. Enemies, friends, you're trying to teach me politics, but I don't think in a political way. I don't see who's friend and who's enemy. And of course, Santa Amarka was very disturbed because Hiranyakashipu was threatened them, unless you teach my son politics, you're going to suffer the consequences. But Prahlad said, no, I'm sorry. But in fact, in the 7th canto of the Bhagavatam, there's more about this. I still haven't gotten to, I'll get back to Bhakti-yoga. There's more. But in the 7th canto of the Bhagavatam, I'll read just this part from a purport from Srila Prabhupada. He says, 7th canto, let me find it, 7th canto, 5th chapter, 12th verse, I think, no, 7th canto, I want to read it because it's powerful. 7th canto, 5th chapter. Yeah. He says this 12th verse, he says, when the Supreme Personality of God is pleased with the living entity, because of his devotional service, one becomes a pundit and does not make distinctions between enemies, friends, and himself. Intelligently, he then thinks every one of us is an eternal servant of God, and therefore we are not different from one another. And then he starts talking about friends and enemies. And Prabhupada says, in the commentary, he said, everyone should be friendly for the service of the Lord. Everyone should praise another's service to the Lord and not be proud of his own service.
Recording in progress.
Is being recorded? People going to use it against me? Everyone should be friendly for the service of the Lord. Everyone should praise another's service to the Lord and not be proud of his own service. This is the way of Vaishnava thinking, Vaikuntha thinking. There may be rivalries and apparent competition between servants in performing service. But in the Vaikuntha planets, the service of another servant is appreciated, not condemned. This is Vaikuntha competition. there's no question of enmity between servants. Everyone's a servant. There's no question of enmity between servants. Fortunately, even though there's no question of it, but sometimes it appears to be there. There's no question of enmity between servants. Everyone should be allowed to render service to the Lord to the best of his ability, and everyone should appreciate the service of others. Such are the activities of Vaikuntha. Since everyone is a servant, everyone is on the same platform and is allowed to serve the Lord according to his ability. There's more, but that's essentially the part that I wanted to read. So, Prabhupada is talking about Vaikuntha. This is the way of Vaikuntha thinking. Prabhupada even used to say that our temples are supposed to be like embassies to the spiritual world. Embassies to Vaikuntha. Just like sometimes when you go into an embassy, you immediately think that you see the country just by going into the embassy. You know, sometimes I remember the old days when I would go to the Indian embassy, I would think, I'm in India. It functions just in the same way. And when I go to the Russian embassy, same thing. I had to go. In the old days, I used to have to go. You weren't able to do anything online. But so when we go to the temples, Prabhupada says they're embassies to the spiritual world. And the embassies of the spiritual world means that within the temples there should be Vaikuntha thinking, Vaishnava thinking. That everyone should, that there may be competition, there be rivals, but everybody appreciates the service of others. Everybody encourages others, appreciates the other's service. And he says that everyone should be allowed to render service to the Lord to the best of his ability and appreciate the service of others. Such are the activities of Vaikuntha. So, of course, Prabhupada said there may be rivalries. Yes, there's even rivalries in the spiritual world. We won't go into all the details of the rivalries of the spiritual world, but they do exist. But the point is, in the spiritual world, there's never any malice. Never any malice. Malice means I want to be like Mugrari. I want to cause pain. Or sometimes one may not even be conscious of the fact that I'm causing pain. May not even be conscious. They may think that, oh, I'm just doing my service. But one should not be proud of their service. As Prabhupada said here, one should not be proud of one's service. Everyone should be given the opportunity to render service and never proud of his own service. And how does he think that? And as Prabhupada explains here, he sees because everybody's serving Krishna. If I impede their service, it's my envy of Krishna. Because everybody's serving Krishna. At least everybody's endeavoring to serve Krishna. Why should I impede somebody who's doing something for Krishna's pleasure? Therefore, Prahlad Maharaj says in the verse that we quoted and we began class today, let everyone become non-envious, let everyone become peaceful by practicing bhakti-yoga, because then they will be able to think of others' benefit. May they always be thinking of the Lord's pleasure. May they always be thinking of the Lord's pleasure. Not my position, not my pride, not my attachments, not what I need for myself. Vaishnava is thinking of what's pleasing to the Lord. That's Vaishnava. And if everybody, as Prahlad Maharaj says, everybody thinks of the Lord, meditates on the Lord, then the result is that they can gradually become free from envy, and only when they're free from envy can they actually think of others' welfare. Very difficult. And sometimes we think, oh, I can think about others' welfare, I can think about others, care about others, I'm concerned about others. But sometimes we think of others' welfare because we're also thinking of our own welfare. I'll think of the welfare of those who are helping me. No, our position is to think of the Lord's pleasure. That's the position of a Vaishnava. Position of Vaishnava is let me think of the Lord's pleasure and let me always meditate on how to please Him, to serve Him, and to not find fault with others. If I'm going to find fault, let me look within my own heart and to see, as so much described in the Brihad Bhagavatam, in the whole first section of Brihad Bhagavatam, when Narada Muni was looking who was the greatest recipient of Krishna's mercy, every Vaishnava he went to thought, oh, I'm not qualified. Why do you think I have Krishna's mercy? I don't do enough service for Krishna. I have no love for Krishna. I don't deserve His mercy. And they always saw that there's somebody who's more advanced than I am. I'm just... And Narada Muni, every person he met, everyone he went to, he approached them and said, I heard you are the greatest recipient of Krishna's mercy. And they immediately said, me? I'm the greatest? I don't do enough. There's no question, because that's how a Vaishnava thinks. A Vaishnava thinks, I don't have enough love. I don't think of Krishna enough. I don't have His mercy. And when a Vaishnava is practicing this internally, he'll think, yes, before I point out the faults of others, let me look within myself to see how I can become a better Vaishnava. Let me become a better Vaishnava. Let me control the urge to speak about others. Let me set the example for myself. A person can be liberal in his dealings with others because he's strict with himself and he's already teaching. Why does he have to open his mouth? If he's strict for himself, he's already teaching. Because others will see. Just see that example and see how happy he is. I want to become like that. Can you tell me how you became like that? How did you become so happy in Krishna consciousness? How did your mind become so controlled? How did you become so peaceful? Then you can tell them. Because you have something to tell them about themselves. Because they want to hear it from you. Because you taught by your example that I'm strict with myself instead of being strict with everyone else. That's a Vaishnava. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur was opening himself up and giving these instructions in Sri Bhakti Loka. I only scratched the surface. He was opening up these instructions to help everyone. What is a Vaishnava? Not a Vaishnava, a Bas. A Vaishnava. We're all aspiring Vaishnavas, we should be thinking. The more we hear what is a Vaishnava, then we realize, I'm an aspiring Vaishnava. One time, one devotee once wrote a poem for Srila Prabhupada, and in the poem, he wrote himself as a Vaishnava. Prabhupada said, oh, no. The devotee never thinks he's a Vaishnava. He's an aspiring Vaishnava. He never thinks himself a Vaishnava. Prabhupada corrected it. Aspiring Vaishnava. I have hope. And why do I have hope? Because I see Vaishnavas that I can associate with and have loving relationships. So I have hope that someday I'll become a Vaishnava. Let everyone teach that kind of an example. That's how to deal with negativity. That's how to deal with it. Let me become strict myself. Let me control my mind, control my speech, control my senses. Let me deal with others in a compassionate way, in a liberal way, being strict with myself and liberal in my social dealings with others. This is Vaishnava, as Prabhupada said. This is non-enviousness in this verse we just read. And then negativity will decrease. Why? If you want to decrease negativity, you don't decrease negativity by some artificial process. Oh, my mind, don't be so negative. You decrease negativity. How many times do we hear Srila Prabhupada said, our philosophy is positive? How many times the Prabhupada said, we're presenting the positive alternative. Krishna consciousness is the positive alternative. When positive is there, the negative automatically. Right? Bhagavatam says, by rendering devotional service to the Supreme Lord, what automatically acquires? Knowledge and detachment. When the positive there, the negative is automatically dissipated. Krishna surya sam maya hayandakara. Krishna is like the sunshine and Maya is like darkness. Wherever there is sunshine, the darkness of illusion, of the influence of the external energy will not manifest. Where the positive is, the negative is dissipated. This is Krishna consciousness. This is what we aspire for. This is how to deal with negativity. Begin within ourselves, and then we'll learn how to, if we look within ourselves, we'll learn how to actually create an atmosphere of loving relationships. And anyways, I spoke a little longer than I was supposed to. And is that okay?
Yes.
Huh? No. I'm supposed to stop at 8:15. Was it? Any questions? Relevant, please.
So you said that we should all begin with ourselves. So when we begin with ourselves, say, it almost seems like there's never that place when we are actually going to see that time when, we could go, if I just speak of myself, like I could go, I'll probably end up always being an aspirant and of being a Vaishnava. And which means that I'm not just feeling that, oh, I have been inflicted with negativity from outside, but I'm also, I'm correcting myself as I'm going. But during that process, how do we be patient with us? Like, I know because, the examples that you mentioned are of, like, all those are already Vaishnavas, like, but as a practitioner, I'm still there, like, I could be inflicting that negative emotions on others and while also receiving some. And so there's one thing called, like, there's forgiveness on both sides. Like, I have to forgive myself and look ahead and also, like, be, like, forgiving to what I have been inflicted with. How do we, is that how we...
Well, you used an important word, patience. Yeah, it's an important word. Very important. We're not going to become pure Vaishnavas overnight. Has everybody figured that out yet? If you haven't figured it out, you better contemplate it for a little while. And by the time you finish contemplating, you'll see overnight has already passed. And it's still not pure Vaishnava. Patience. But what to do in the meantime? And as I said, that the tendency, at least if we know what the tendency is, about speaking about others, if we're patient and do at least every day what we're supposed to do to become clean from that tendency, the more we actually gather together to talk about Krishna, and to hear about Krishna, and instead of when we see our friends, immediately we start talking about others. It's a good start. It's a real good start. It works. It really works. But sometimes we're just not patient enough because we're looking for instant results. Right? looking for instant, we have to be patient enough, right? Rupa Goswami writes in Upadeshamrita, the holy name, form, qualities, and pastimes of Krishna are transcendently sweet, just like sugarcane. But one who's been afflicted by the jaundice of avidya can't taste anything sweet. He says, but it's very wonderful that if one very carefully goes on chanting that name, attentively, very carefully goes on every day, then what happens is a natural attraction is awakened and the disease of the jaundice becomes destroyed at the root. So, talking about Krishna can still sometimes not be so tasteful. Because we're more spontaneously attracted to start talking about common enemies or so many other things that we can find. As I said, the natural proclivity for every living being is to talk about somebody. If you read the Bhagavatam, and the gopis are gathered together in little groups and they're talking about Krishna, but they're talking about Krishna. It's a natural proclivity to talk about somebody. But unfortunately, due to our conditioned nature, we utilize the valuable time of the human form of life improperly, and we haven't designated a time in the association of devotees when we keep all topics related to Krishna. If we don't designate a time in the association of devotees when we keep all topics related to Krishna, then we'll be patient for a lot. We'll have to be patient for a lot longer because we won't experience anything happening to the heart. It won't change. The more we think about the material world, the more we think with jealousy, pride, or hatred, or envy, and we speak with those impure motives in the heart. That's why Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, before one speaks, before you open your mouth, like we really have to learn to create a buffer. You know, buffer should be every time we open our mouth to speak about somebody, we should ask ourselves, do I really need to say this? Why am I saying this? And the other person should be thinking, do I really need to hear this? What am I getting? What benefit am I getting by hearing this? Do I really need to hear it? If we don't have that kind of a buffer, because we're not pure yet. So we do have to, some self-discipline has to be there. And the best self-discipline is, before you speak about somebody else, immediately ask yourself, do I really need to say this? What am I going to accomplish? What am I getting out of it? What am I getting out of it? Am I creating enmity? And Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that. Let me just read what, and it's under the category of patience. He says in Śrī Kṛṣṇa, patience. He says that he said there are 6 types of urges, namely the urges of speech, mind, anger, belly, tongue, and genitals. With a desire to speak more, a person becomes talkative. If speech is not regulated, then enmity arises from talking about others. It's right there. If it's not regulated, then enmity arises. We create enemies just by talking about others in a negative way. So, until we become pure, the heart becomes free from envy, until we remove ourselves from that classification that Prabhupada gave to the word khalaḥ, almost every, we need to be patient, and we have to be a little bit self-disciplined, enough to say, do I really need to say this about this person to somebody? What am I getting? Am I bolstering my pride? Am I bolstering myself? What am I accomplishing by saying this about others? And if we learn, everyone learns that. It's not, sometimes the tendency is to think, oh, this is what they need to hear. isn't it? Isn't it? Oh, I get it. That's what they need to hear. No, it's not me. I know. No. Everyone means everyone. Because the tendency, I've been through this before. I know. Sometimes the bodhisattva with a smile. Yeah, that's right. Exactly. I know who needs to hear this. Not me. Prabhupada said almost everyone. So almost everyone needs to hear. So if somebody thinks I'm not in the almost everyone category, then he thinks he's a Vaishnava. Uh-oh. If I'm not in the almost everyone category, then there's only certain persons who are outside the almost everyone category of envious persons. That's a Vaishnava. So if I think I'm not in the almost everyone category, I think I'm a Vaishnava. Dangerous. Then I become proud because I think I'm a Vaishnava. Patience. And utilize the time wisely to speak about Krishna. It works. I know it works. I've seen it work. I've seen how it works. I know I have to be patient. That's why I try to speak about Krishna as much as possible. Because I know I need it. So, did that answer your question?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, thank you.
Okay. I'm going to stop there. Thank you for inviting me.